Welcome, everyone. We'll get started now. This is REL Central's webinar, Delivering Work-Based Learning in Rural Schools, Opportunities and Options. My name is Douglas Gagnon. I'm a senior researcher at Marzano Research, where we host the REL Central contract, and I'll be facilitating this webinar along with my colleague Doug Van Dyne, who's also a senior researcher here. At this point, I'll just share a little bit of background and how this webinar came about. So as I mentioned, this is being hosted by REL Central. We're one of 10 regional education laboratories around the country that are funded by U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Sciences. So we work in a 7-state region that includes Wyoming, Colorado, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. And within this region, we provide technical support, conduct applied research, and disseminate research as necessary. And within REL Central, we host the Rural Education Research Alliance. We can go to the next slide. So this is one of a number of research alliances at REL Central. And essentially, it's a group of projects across the region that's shared by, that is united by the shared goal of trying to address challenges in rural schools. And traditionally in the Rural Education Research Alliance, we focused on the areas of teacher recruitment and retention and looking at opportunity gaps. Although speaking with stakeholders throughout our region, it became clear that work-based learning was an area of interest and something that people wanted to learn more about. So it was partly through conversations with our regional partners in this alliance that this came about. And I know that we have a couple members from the Alliance participating today, so welcome to them as well. So on with an overview of what's in store today, we'll start with introducing our presenters. From there, we'll discuss basically what is work-based learning when it's being implemented, so what are some of the delivery challenges with doing so, particularly in rural areas. We'll introduce some frameworks that can be helpful when implementing work-based learning. And then we'll hear from a couple presenters that are on the ground implementing work-based learning, and they'll share their experiences with it. So with that, we will go to introductions. Our first presenter is going to be Steve Klein. Next slide. Steve Klein is the director for the Center for School, Family, and Community. And Steve really brings a wealth of experience in the career and technical education and workforce readiness field in general. We'll also have Neil Wolf. Neil Wolf is an agriculture instructor at Grand River Technical School in Missouri. So he will share his experiences there, as will Sarah Bird, who is curriculum instruction and assessment director at Boone Central Schools in Nebraska. And again, myself and Doug Van Dyne are facilitating this webinar. So with that, I will turn things over to Steve Klein. Take it away, Steve.
Great, thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I wanted to share with you a quick story that gives a sense of how work-based learning can, when it's not done well, can manifest, and then take you through the framework for how it can be. So many years ago, that would be about 3, my oldest son, who at the time was a junior, was working at a climbing gym in our area. After school, it wasn't connected to any of the school curriculum. And basically, he was a junior working with, it's a climbing gym, so these are college students and students who were or people who were taking some time in between. So he was the youngest one there. Well, he went to the holiday party. And, you know, it was about 11 o'clock, it was a school night, and he wasn't back. And so I texted him and said, you know, when are you coming home? Oh, soon, you know, 11:30, nothing, wait, when you come out? Soon. 11:45, well, we're trying to get a ride. Well, you know, at about close to 1 in the morning, he finally showed up, and my wife walked down to meet him at the front door. And she came back and he said, well, Hallie, and I said, what's up? She said, he seems a little unfocused, but and I kind of smell alcohol, but, you know, I sent him to bed. Well, the next morning I'm at work, and at 9 in the morning I get a text from my wife that says, so we have a very sad and repentant child this morning, and a word to the wise. don't throw up in a wire wastebasket. So I came home from work, and he's stretched out on the sofa. We made him go to school, and he was hard to see because it was a green sofa. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, they started serving this drink, and it was called the White Russian. It was really good, so I had 10 of them. So we had a conversation about what it means to be working and what it means to be working with people older than one. And we also talked a little bit about the job. And what he really learned from this whole experience was he never wanted to ever clean another toilet again, and he was never going to drink. Now, that's probably a lot to ask from a kid, but we were happy to hear the latter part at least. So he experienced a work-based learning that was not connected to school and wasn't very structured. And it didn't really work out all that well. So what is work-based learning? Well, what you see on the screen right now is the federal definition for what constitutes work-based learning. It's from the Perkins legislation. And I think simply put, what it's saying is we learn by doing. That having an opportunity to be out in the field and seeing and experiencing is a great way to learn, and that context matters. How the instruction is delivered and how those interactions occur are really important. It's not just about putting someone out in the field and saying, go do. So what is kind of nice here, you see on the screen, is some of the research behind work-based learning. And I kind of read is that it supports what's probably pretty much common sense to most of us, that students who participate in work-based learning are more likely to be prepared for the workforce entry and to be more engaged in school. And you can see these references you'll be able to download those afterwards if you'd like with the slides. But they really lay out, in terms of the first bullet, some of the outcomes that have been identified, with the idea that work-based learning prepares students for the workforce. That it also allows them to be a little more motivated both at the work site, but also in school, more increased attendance and lower dropout rates. Now, there's a lot more out there, but I think that really these examples are some of what the research says is behind work-based learning, why we should do it. But the second bullet is really more about the intentionality behind it, that there needs to be a structure to the way that the programs are offered, that the curriculum needs to be integrated in, right? The work-based curriculum has to be integrated in with the classroom curriculum. There has to be a purpose behind this. And it should be connected to the real world. It should be authentic. So essentially, in terms of that structure, I guess one of the things I think that is really important, and if you don't leave this call with anything else, it's that work-based learning isn't dichotomous. It's not a yes/no checkbox, you did it. If it's going to be authentic and if it's going to have meaning, then there should be a holistic approach to work-based learning. Now, I don't think there's any one right way of doing it, but on your screen you can see a continuum of work-based learning options. It was put together by colleagues at FHI 360 and Connect Ed, and it lays out the ways that the strategies that work-based learning can be offered. You can see that one of the interesting pieces here is that it can be offered in any grade. And those grades are approximations, but essentially it should be progressive. It's an experience that starts with career awareness, where students learn what is work? What does it even mean to be working? Career exploration, where students begin then to look at the different types of careers that are out there, and that's often in the middle grades. And with Perkins reauthorization, in Perkins 5, it is now expanded. Funding can be used in grades 5 to 8. Career preparation, what we tend to think of as the actual gaining of skills, and with programs of study being able to connect to post-secondary and employment. And then the actual career training where you get very specific. We all know that that we're no longer expecting students to graduate and get a job, that there is going to be a need to get some sort of advanced education, secondary students. So looking at grades 13 plus. And then along the bottom is a continuum of experiences, starting with what can be very light touches, such as workplace tours or guest speakers, and then extending all the way up through on-the-site training, paid work experiences, or unpaid work experience. And in between, there's a whole host of various ones. This isn't to suggest that workplace tours are only appropriate in grades K to 4, rather that this is a continuum of approaches, and that one wants to start with a lighter touch and move towards a progressively more rigorous experience. States are in the process of taking some of these continuum ideas and applying them. An example of a framework looks like in Kansas is they have taken that work-based learning continuum and using that as a way of publicizing to the fields. You can see that career awareness, career exploration, career preparation. And again, examples within there of how career awareness, career exploration, and career preparation can be offered. So for example, career awareness could be something as simple as a guest speaker or career fair, but then moving up to, in the career preparation, service learning, internships. So there are strategies out there, and I'm going to be sharing with you later in the presentation some examples that from some of your own states that you may look familiar. But first, I wanted to take a quick poll of where you stand with respect to work-based learning. And we have two questions. The first is, what work-based learning options do you offer students? On your screen, if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see there's a Q&A box. And if you go to the Q&A box and click on it, you'll be able to type in comments. And what I'd like to start with, get a sense of what work-based learning options do you currently offer to your students? So if you could take a minute or two and start typing in what work-based learning options you currently are offering your students. Internships, apprenticeships, and clinicals. Anyone else? Project search, apprenticeships. There we go, job shadowing, career fairs. Yeah, so a lot of the cooperative work experience, mentorships. We offer none. So tours, job shadows, great. Youth apprenticeship, work-based co-ops through the town, job shadowing, volunteers, good. Job fairs, volunteering, mentorship, tour, job shadows. So we have a real range here of the continuum. It was noted that Wisconsin offers a continuum that starts with the light touch and moves towards a progressively more. So you can see that teacher externships, really great, a program so that teachers learn a little bit more about what it means for students to work. Guest speakers. So great, co-op with experience. Oh, a coffee shop in your school. That would be addictive for some of us. So what I'd like to do then is ask you the next question, which is, what's the biggest challenge you face in offering work-based learning to students? So go ahead there and type in some of the challenges that you face. Transportation. If someone's reading from my notes. Living in a small community. Well, hence the rural conversation, and we'll be hopefully touching on some ideas around that. We have some great examples from people in the field. Relevant placements, payment, businesses that will cooperate, great point. Enough employers, quality opportunities. We just need to start it. Collecting data, oh great, student level data. We'll talk a little bit about that and the experience. Matching students, correct, yeah, that's a tough one. Time and proximity, rural, insurance coverage, great point. We'll talk about a little bit about that. Not allowing, yes, the age 17 and under, putting students in the work site. Resources in a tiny town. Curriculum, framework is weak. Great, okay, supervision, yes, wonderful. Well, we're going to come back to a lot of this. So very few businesses. Okay. Really great points here, and we'll be able to compile these to look at some of these. So wanted to talk now. You keep on typing because this is great. But wanted to also now talk a little bit about, well, what are then the goals of work-based learning in a quality program? And not surprisingly, a lot of this is going to be about the skills, right? It's the academic, technical, and employability skills. I think that's one of the places we always go to, is that a good work-based learning program, excuse me, allows students to take the skills that they're learning in the classroom and then apply them in a work setting and see the relevance. But I just had a sort of an epiphany not too long ago. I was working with Portland Public Schools and meeting with their advisor, their placement advisor. And he was talking about the idea that students are always thinking about academic, technical, and employability skills. But one of the pieces that's missing is the connections. So not only is it to learn about the career options that are out there, because you go out there and you can see it, but to actually build relationships with people who are in the field, that sort of social capital, if you will. And so work-based learning provides students, particularly those who may not have a large social network through their parents or guardians, a way of building relationships. The opportunity to sort of see people in the real world, how they operate. And really an important point here is to become aware of the post-secondary education and training needs to get to the next level. Not all students have a real sense. The problem with life is it's all experimental. There's very little control. And so we're kind of going through life without an understanding of all the options that are out there. And so students who go out in the work base and see and build relationships with people also get a sense of what do we need to do next. Well, there are challenges, and we just heard, and they're still coming in. I love this. Very few businesses, work-based. But really what we're talking about here is that if it's so positive an experience, why aren't we doing more of it? And as many of you have pointed out, there's a lot of challenges with policies, for example, that limit the academic credit for students who take activities outside the building. That you don't have a teacher that's endorsed necessarily out there, and so having a way of getting students credit for that can be challenging. We heard the transportation costs and busing limitations. This is true across the board. Getting an opportunity to get students out and in the field takes resources, and that has a cost associated with it, as well as sort of limitations in terms of the geographically, how far you have to be able to get students out there. Scheduling constraints, the tyranny of the master schedule, having a time provided so that students can get out there and actually spend an amount of time that's more than a short period at a site when you factor in the transportation. We heard there was something about liability insurance, the difficulty of putting students out into the field when there are not a lot of opportunities that are sort of safe, if you will, in some cases, where, in terms of manufacturing, for example, the danger. The employer relationship is a tough one. Teachers don't necessarily have relationships with the employer community. And so if you don't have those connections, and it's not like teachers, as a former teacher myself, it's not like teachers are sitting around in the teacher's lounge in between classes, reading. They're grading papers, they're dealing with student issues, personal issues, they're dealing with pedagogical issues. So it's really hard for teachers to find the time to build these relationships, particularly because they're outside the building. And then the concern over student performance, often it's the case that people don't want to put students out to an employer who's willing to participate. If the student's not going to do a good job, and because they don't want this school to look bad. So there's a lot of challenges in terms of how to get the students involved in work-based learning. But we're here to talk a little bit more about rural. And one of the points that was brought up by a number of people was the community not having necessarily an economic base to support providing the services. The distance that exists, trying to get students from school to an employer, particularly if you don't have a lot of employers right nearby. Issues around the career and technical education program options, that you don't always have a program or programs that lend themselves to work-based learning easily, or a scope of programs that would be able to get students across to many different types of employers. You can't put all of your students in one site. And then the teacher experience and the ability to learn about this. It's hard. A lot of rural sites have turnover of educators, and that can make it difficult not only to establish the relationships, but also to have people who have had enough workplace experience in enough depth to be able to offer students a placement, and structured one at that. And not surprisingly then, if we look at some of the research that's out there in terms of what's being offered and by whom, you can see that this is an example. This is from a report by the National Center for Education Statistics. And what they did is they surveyed public school districts that were offering various types of work-based learning activities as part of their career and technical education program. And they looked at the types of opportunities that were being offered, the type of work-based learning opportunities. And you can see a legend there. The city is the crosshatch, gray is suburban, yellow there is town, and bluish is rural. And really, not surprisingly, although all of these work-based learning opportunities are being offered, rural sites tend to have the greatest challenges offering. For example, with respect to mentoring by local employers, nationally, 65% of sites offer some sort of mentoring, and at the city level, 87% of sites offer some sort of mentoring, yet only 55% of rural sites are able to offer that program. So it's definitely the case, and many of you who are typing in the challenges you're facing, those are fairly well documented by you, as well as the survey results, that rural sites have a hard time delivering because of the challenges, not only that all sites face, but in particular those for rural sites who are separated often from opportunities. So, spoke earlier that work-based learning should not be seen as a dichotomous experience. And in fact, what you really need is a framework to ensure that high-quality experience exists. It's not enough for students to just show up. So when we talk about a framework, what do we mean? Well, one is that we have to come up with a terminology that we use to describe work-based learning, because we have sort of the potential for a Tower of Babel here. You have educators who speak one language, you have employers who speak another, and we're asking them to collaborate. And so it's really important that as part of a framework, we come up with a common understanding of what it means to offer work-based learning and what are all the specific elements of that. We need to know what constitutes a meaningful engagement and at what grade level. So the qualifying experiences, we really need to be clear on what constitutes what we would consider a work-based learning experience, and obviously the terminology around that. The connections, the instructional connections. There has to be a way of integrating students' experiences, both in the classroom, into the workplace, as well as from the workplace back into the classroom. If students are just going out and working somewhere and there's no connection to what they're doing in school, some of the research that we saw earlier probably won't apply, that students are more motivated or because they're not necessarily seeing the connections, nor are they understanding why they're bothering. Fidelity, how we saw before the idea of assessment. How is it that program quality is going to be assured? So how is it that when we're putting a student out there, we know that the student is actually experiencing something and the employer is working in concert with the educator and not at cross purposes, right? We don't want students showing up and then being told to mop the floor. And then the assessment piece, if students don't see a connection, and in some cases, if they can get either academic credit or in some cases even a certification, if it's part of that, but there has to be some authentic way of assessing the student experiences, not only for themselves, but also for their educators. They have to be seeing that there's meaning behind it. So the good news is there are lots of tools out there, but I've tried to do is I've identified two sets of resources that I think it's worth knowing about. One is by the U.S. Department of Education. The Office of Career Technical and Adult Education, OCTE, has a work-based learning toolkit that my team actually helped develop a few years back. And what it does is it lays out what are the components of work-based learning, how you can go about creating this work-based learning strategy, resources around how to engage employers, to collect the data, and then finally to scale the programs. And if you click on the link at cted.gov/work-based learning toolkit, WBL toolkit, you'll see that this site is available to you. You're able to click through it and gather the resources that are available there and been put together by researchers from looking at across the continuum. The other place that I'll steer you is the Work-Based Learning Manual, a how-to guide for work-based learning. This was put together by my good friends Ivan Charner and Robin White at FHI 360, and it lays out a set of activities starting with introduction and culminating with teacher externships. And for each of these modules, there's an overview of what we mean by the area, how to implement it, an implementation timeline, and then resources. And what's really nice about the resources is that in the right-hand column, so for each of these, there's anywhere from 8 to 12 resources that are downloadable. So for example, for guest speakers, there are forms, there are email examples, there are checklists, there's a timeline for how to engage and work with these individuals. Great resource. And if those of you who just need to do it, as someone mentioned, here's a place where you can begin to gather that information and put it out in a structured way. And it's important also that when you do the work, you think about your own state. Many states, although not all, have frameworks that they've developed. So some of what you saw in terms of that framework I had before, the terminology and so forth, they exist or they're there in pieces. And so one way to also get started, not only to look at the national context, but is to see what's available in your own state. Can you look for examples that are in other states and then use this information to come up with your own ideas and resources? I want to really stress, there's no one right way to do this. But I think you're all on this call because you recognize this is common sense. Students learn best when they are able to apply what they're learning in the classroom, and when it's integrated in and done in an intentional, thoughtful way, it can benefit the student. Frankly, it benefits the teacher and it can benefit the employer. So with that, I'm going to open this up to questions, and Doug, I believe you're in charge.
Yes. Thanks so much, Steve. Doug Van Dyne, did any question bubble up from the chat box that you wanted to bring out?
Nobody's asked any questions, but I wanted to remind the participants that feel free to type in questions in the Q&A box and we will pass them on to presenters. But if people have them right now, go ahead and type them in and we'll share them. Steve can see them as well.
Steve, I did have a question. We think back to the survey research on gaps in WBL opportunities across urban central locale. And as you said, it kind of made sense in the rural specific challenges that there would be some gaps there. For instance, local employer mentoring, it would make sense that it might be harder for rural schools to offer that given, fewer employment options around them. But I was a little surprised by the gap in student-run enterprise, because that seems like something that can be done, you know, in most environments. And maybe this is kind of a misunderstanding on my part. But did you have any thoughts on why student-run enterprise is also, you know, disproportionately not offered in rural places?
I mean, I can conjecture, and what's also going to be interesting is we do have presentations by two educators who have actually done a pretty nice job of putting together programs. I think some of it has to do with scale. Some of it may have to do with resources, and some of it may have to do with just teachers being aware of how to go about doing this. So it is sort of surprising, because that is one where you don't necessarily need to have an employer base to be able to offer it. What's also interesting about that, though, is that the highest, although rural sites lag on all of the different types of programs, the highest opportunity were the on-the-job training, internship, practicums, co-op, and so forth. So there is some evidence that rural sites are trying to reach out to the extent that they can to the surrounding employers.
That makes sense.
So Steve, can you see the questions that are in the Q&A box?
I can. So Katie Graham asks, is there any outcome data or research on simulated workplace experience? I don't know of any. So one of the challenges for everyone out there in terms of rigorous research is rigor would be more causal related in terms of being, for example, randomized controlled trials or some sort of quasi-experimental, where you can try to control for a lot of variables that can confound or bias the results. There was a report on simulated workplace experience from some sites that had some success with that the National Center for Innovation, Career and Technical Education put out. So I think if you type simulated work-based learning and the National Center for Innovation in Career and Technical Education, you might find that report. But I'm not aware of any research on simulated workplace experiences that would reach the level of rigor. Lindsay asks, are you going to talk more about how to get around the barriers of providing work-based learning in rural? So some of that is going to be addressed by our other speakers in terms of how they went about trying to address that. I think, though, some of this, I will say, and part of the reason I put up a lot of those resources is this is about trying to take programming that's at your site and then using examples and other information that's out there, being able to build something for your specific site. So I don't necessarily think any one approach is going to work for all people, but there are examples. There's a multitude of suggestions and resources in the site, in the examples that I provided. Timothy asked, will we have access to webinar content? Yes, it will be shared.
Yes, we'll be sharing the slide deck and a recording in a few weeks when it becomes approved and available, and that will just go out to anyone that registered. So, yes.
And Laura suggested there's an international group, so that was good to know that some work on work-based learning. It's not limited to work simulation, however. And there was a question here by Aaron about adding success of those who ran a student-run business, and what was the business, and well, this is a great, Aaron, it's almost as though you were laying groundwork for the next presentation. So we'll hear a little bit about how some educators have gone about putting in some really interesting programs. I don't see any other questions. Is it, Doug, should we transition over?
I think that's a.
Thanks for that segue.
So with Steve providing a fantastic foundation, now we'll hear from a couple people that are doing this work. So first we'll hear from Neil Wolf. Again, he's an agriculture instructor in Missouri. So Neil, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Neil Wolf. If I can get this thing going here. I've been an ag teacher for 14 years. This is my third school. I'm actually from Chillicothe, the town in which I teach. This slide will go in a minute, I'm sure. Okay, there we go. As you can see, Chillicothe, Missouri is where we are located. We're sitting right around 10,000 people. We are a relatively rural community, a lot of ag base in our community. We're about an hour and a half northeast of Kansas City, if that gives you guys some idea of where we are. I actually teach at a facility called the Litton Center, the Litton Agri-Science Learning Center. And this facility is probably different than most of yours that I'm talking about, and I understand that. It has made my job with work-based learning a little bit easier. I'm trying to get this slide to go here. There we go. All right. So a few things. Like I said, we're a little different than probably most of you that are participating in this webinar today. We have a 37-acre school farm. It's actually 36.7, but I'm in charge of the maintenance and equipment maintenance and things like that. So I always stretch it to 37 when I'm talking to people. On that campus, we have our ag building where we hold our agriculture classes. We have several other buildings that are used for numerous things, such as fairgrounds. We have over 150 events here a year. We've got a couple buildings people can rent out. We do have a greenhouse. We have a wetlands and a pond. But all of this was made possible through a lot of generous donations by our community. There's over $5 million put in out here over the course of the last 15 years, and only 500,000 of that came from schools. So as you can see, my challenges are already lessened in my community because agriculture in general is big in our community, and our people like to support that. So I've got a head start on a lot of you, I'm sure, on that. But Jerry Litton, I don't know how many people are familiar with that name. He was a U.S. representative. He was a national FFA officer. A lot of people around here thought he was going to be the next president. Unfortunately, he died in a plane crash. But this place is dedicated to him and his family. All right, our program today predominantly is agricultural based. We do have our state curriculum that we follow. There are four high school teachers in our program, so I am the one that focuses probably the most on what we call work-based learning. Our best course probably for that, in my mind, is property and equipment maintenance. That is a class that I teach every day, as well as we'll talk a little bit about the greenhouse, the student-run greenhouse, and then I have a natural resources class that kind of ties into work-based learning as well. But we have 3 high schools that send us, primarily just Chillicothe, but we get about 20 kids probably from surrounding schools. We've got 200 and some students that pass through our doors every day. So we have a pretty big responsibility there to meet those students' needs. One of the benefits I have is I don't have to leave the facility to provide a lot of work-based learning experiences, and I'll go through that as we go here, but I know that will be a challenge for some of you. The first one to talk about would be the school farm. This is, again, kind of a different animal. You've seen some pictures there. We do anything from, dealing with the community and setting up, tearing down from events, and we also build our own facilities most of the time. Now, not the ag building, or anything like that, but we've built several hog facilities, cattle facilities. That picture there on the right, you see us pouring some concrete in our cattle barn. So that is a big benefit for us. It's a lot easier for us to provide that work-based learning when we have real life projects for our students to do, to plan and to carry out. We also have the greenhouse, the student-run greenhouse, that is at the beginning of the year. I give that to those kids, and they are responsible for ordering, you know, paying for, turning in the requisitions. They're in charge of getting a work schedule, who's going to water, and then they basically make sure that we don't go broke running it. So there's a lot of dealing with the community, obviously, through that. And we also have a lady here close that runs a greenhouse that's in here quite a bit to help us through that and to get that, you know, that real world work experience into the classroom. And then finally, that property maintenance course, it's the curriculum that goes along with ag construction and structures. There's electricity, plumbing, equipment maintenance, just general farm maintenance, concrete, things like that, that fortunately out here, we are able to teach that in the classroom, have some industry professionals in, and then take it out to the field. And part of what Steve said earlier, you know, we're big believers that people learn by doing. And, you know, it's important to have that classroom instruction so they know what they're doing when they get out there. But until you actually physically do it, we believe you're not comfortable in the way that you should be, and you don't feel prepared in the way that you should. Another way we integrate the work-based learning here is we employ a high school intern during the summer, and as well as 2 college interns during the summer. So those are more, you know, industry based just because of the way those are set up than our intercurricular work-based experiences. So going through here a little bit about the school farm. We have, along with the school farm, I mentioned we have several buildings that are rented out. You know, we have over 150 events a year out here. So our students are always kind of connected to the community and different aspects of the community. They deal with those people when they come in, they take their requests, we turn around and we try to basically meet those requests for them. So that's a good experience for them in learning to deal with the public. It really extends our classroom because we are teaching agriculture here. So one of our main focuses is actually animal science. Last year we had 60 some hogs here that were the kids that they kept here, housed here over the summer, about 10 sheep and goats, about 10 cattle. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of opportunities for us that, again, I understand that a lot of people do not have, but being here on the farm has helped us with some of those challenges as far as the transportation and things like that. We also, going along with that school farm, we have to have some trailers, obviously, to get livestock places. The maintenance and the ordering of parts and all that stuff is left to our property and equipment maintenance class. We also, I think that's the next one here. Nope, greenhouse next. Okay, so our student-run greenhouse. Our greenhouse is actually, I'm looking here, where is it? It's 1,150 square feet. We raise anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 bedding plants a year. Through this class, these students are exposed to a lady around here who runs her own greenhouse as her sole business. She's very knowledgeable. She also knows what she's looking for in employees. She is a guest presenter in our class quite a bit, and she is a great resource for our kids to bounce questions off of. The first few times she comes in, it's pretty funny. They don't have a lot of questions, and then after they've been out there trying to run through this experience and be successful in it, they start having a lot of questions by the end of the year. So it's kind of funny how that works. But they do all from beginning to end. They do the ordering, the care for the plants, like I said, the work schedule, and then they are also in charge of advertising and selling. So that does get them out in the community as well, and gets them experience doing those things that they wouldn't normally have experience doing. Keep it relatively short here. Moving on to property maintenance. This class is really the one in my mind that gets our kids the experience they need. Now, most of these kids are probably within the bottom 60% of their class. So they're not our real academics. These are the kids that are going to go out and get the type of jobs that we can train them on here at school. So they do things such as equipment maintenance. You can see there's a picture of our skid steer and our smaller tractor. We also have 2 larger tractors. We are in charge of maintaining the lawn. So we have 3 lawn mowers, several weed eaters, and then all the equipment that comes along with running a farm, all the, the tiller, the box blade, the disc, those types of things. Our kids get experience on all of that machinery. And when they leave here, they are comfortable and they are confident in running that machinery. A lot of our guys that come out of that class end up working for local farmers for a while they go continue their education. And those people know to call me because I have those kids in class and I can tell them exactly how good they're going to be or maybe how much work they still need. But that property maintenance class really runs the gamut of anything you could possibly need to do to maintain a facility such as this one. Like I mentioned before, we go through electricity, plumbing, equipment maintenance is a big one. That's really a learn by doing, and a lot of times I'm learning by doing when we're doing that as well. Concrete, just, things that are, you can read it in a book, but those are things that students are uncomfortable doing, and I'm uncomfortable doing sometimes until you actually get out there and do it. And when a student becomes confident, I think probably everyone listening knows that confidence is a big key in success. So getting them the experience and giving them the opportunity to get out there and get their hands dirty and do it has really helped those kids. Some of the goals I was looking through there of WBL, the first one's employability skills. And like I said, this class really touches on those because they are the exact skills that they're going to need to go out and use. We have an advisory committee that comes in and helps us determine what skills are needed and where we need to focus. That class also is one where we bring in a lot of industry professionals. For example, if we're going over, let's say concrete, we're pouring concrete, we're going to have one of the local concrete guys come in here, and he's going to present, he's going to talk to the kids and answer questions. So they get more of a professional, mind on it than mine, coming from an education background. They get to hear and see some different viewpoints there. They also get to build those relationships with those community people, and they learn about their career options through that. What I've done in the past, if those professionals are available, I have those industry professionals come in and for example, last year we poured a bunch of concrete. The same guy I had come in, present in class, came out and helped us pour that concrete. So not only were they, learning from me, but they were learning from the real deal too. So moving on to, let's see, challenges. The biggest challenge I have is supervising, multiple groups of students that can be 30 acres apart from one another. And I'm going to be the first to admit, I've taught 14 years. I'm still learning on how to do that. The big thing there is know your students, know who's capable of what, and know not who to send together away from you. And then another challenge for me is developing and implementing appropriate assessments. I have rubrics for the class. The big thing is they walk in the first day and they know usually coming in because they've heard from other students, but I treat this class like a job. You're here on time. Are you ready to work? Did you do a good job when you were here? I try to treat this class like a job because half of these kids that take this class won't be furthering their education. They need to learn what it means to be a good employee while they're here. So they get that practice just through this class alone. I treat it like a job. And then another one, a big challenge we face here is funding. And I hate to even call it a challenge because we're giving so much out here and people have been very generous to us. But, new buildings, last year we built a compost facility. The year before we built another hog facility. Those things cost money, obviously. So a lot of times we try to get donations for those, but sometimes it falls on other, on grants or even the Litton Foundation. And then equipment maintenance. Anytime you have kids running equipment, it's gonna break. So probably the biggest challenge I face is finding time to fix all that. It'd be nice if we could fix all that during that 45-minute class every day. Most of the time that falls on me outside of that class. So the good news is when it breaks, I got something to teach the kids on. The bad news is I don't always have enough time to complete the fix while they're in there. So some lessons I've learned through this. The first one is give all students opportunities. I was guilty when I started my career, and I don't think I'm sexist, but I would not give the girls dirty jobs, and I don't know why, or as dirty jobs. And I finally had one girl say something to me and kind of bring it to my mind a little bit. And since then, I've been giving him what I kind of consider the worst jobs. And believe it or not, kids will surprise you. Doesn't matter the gender, the size, the mental makeup. There's always kids that'll surprise you if you give them a chance. So one of the biggest lessons I learned was to give all students opportunities, not just the ones you think you can that can handle it. A big thing for me is I have to establish my routines early. I'm sending kids out on equipment. We have 45 minutes. If they don't get back here, they miss the bus back to the high school, and that kind of messes up the rest of the day for everybody. So the big thing is that first week or so is establishing those routines early. The next thing is allowing students to fail. For a while, I was worried that, you know, this is my job. If this place doesn't look perfect, then we're going to be in trouble. And I realized the more I did it, kids have to fail to learn a lot of times. And if you just allow, if you show a little patience, the first day you give a job to a kid may only be a learning experience, may be all you accomplish that day. So being patient, allowing students to fail, and knowing that they're not necessarily not giving effort, but that they've never done it before, that's another lesson I've had to learn over time. So again, we have a little bit different setup here, and I realize that a lot of our work-based learning happens here at the farm, bringing industry professionals into us, and the work actually occurs here. So that's a challenge that we get to overcome just from a logistical standpoint, but otherwise, hopefully that gives you an idea of kind of how we are implementing that here in Chillicothe. But anyway, if you guys have any questions, I guess now's the time to feel free to ask.
Right, so we do have one question that was written in. Did you have any challenges with liability insurance or other policies with students using heavy equipment in the property maintenance class?
You know, I haven't yet. That's something that's been worrying me for a while. But our administration does not seem to have an issue with just our general insurance covering that. So I'm sure every school is going to be different there. Our administrators are you know, it's been something that's been going on for a while, and we have some new administrators here. They kind of came in as it was already started. So they've kind of let it go as is, and I'm not sure they have made a lot of noise on insurance. The big thing there really is the safety tests. The first week or so of school, we go through safety on all the equipment and all the implements, and make sure making sure I keep those on record. So it's a lot like a shop class for a teacher. As long as you've got that backup and the students know what they're doing when they go out there, then you should be okay.
And do you just work with one high school, or do you work with several in your region?
Well, predominantly with just one, but we have two sending schools. They're smaller schools, but they come to us just for the ag program. So they go to their high school during the day, and they bus them over here for a few hours a day for agriculture classes, and then they bus them back.
All right, Neil. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, we will turn things over to Sarah Bird.
Hello, my name is Sarah Bird, and I'm at Boone Central in Albion, Nebraska, and Petersburg. Our school is a consolidation of two smaller communities, and it's not switching slides here, so I don't know if you can help me out with that. There we go. We have approximately 200 students in our high school, grades 9 through 12. And you can see here from the chart that one of the struggles or challenges that we are faced with is a declining population. And so what's really driven the changes that we've made in our programs has been this trend in population, and how can we get students more aware of the opportunities that we have in our community and to get them thinking entrepreneurially so that they would come back and potentially be employers or employees here in Albion or in Petersburg. So in our last census, we were a town of about 1,600, and then our neighboring town was a town of about 300. So we are very, very rural. So our redesign was really focused around the National Career Academy model and standards, and we looked at those standards through the lens of a small school, and we kept asking ourselves, how can we get as close as possible to what they would call like a gold standard level within the constraints that we have as a rural community? And so our first step in our redesign was to provide lunch and learns for our business people. And we were just asking them, will you partner with us? And at the time, we didn't really even know what that partnership would or could look like, but just saying who out there would be interested in working on this together with us as educators. And so we started with the lunch and learns. And then after that, we said, we need to make it even more convenient for our business people. And so we started to go to them. It was our high school counselor and our curriculum director at the time. They both went out to the businesses and started meeting with the businesses one-on-one, because everyone had kind of their unique stories that we felt like if we listened to them, we acknowledged what their struggles and their challenges were, they would be more willing to partner with us. We had at the time a school board member who was really in favor of this redesign, and her husband owned a business in town, a farm equipment supplier, and they were both instrumental in helping us redesign our programs. And that's what I would suggest to those of you that are watching or listening, is thinking about who are those influential people in your communities that you need to get on board, because if you get them on board, you know that there's 5 to 10 others that will too. And so I feel like that's really where we started with, was those key connectors and involving them in the conversations. So our redesign started with our career and technical education programs, and we just looked at what are we currently offering and how could we make it better. And we got the feedback from our business partners to say, okay, this is what the needs are in business and industry locally. And then we looked at what are the needs with our state, and then where are students going if they're going outside of the area, and where are their kind of student interests lie. So our program, as it exists today, involves, we call it our Career Academy. And if you are a Career Academy completer, you have taken 3 content area courses in one of our pathways. And all of these align to what you probably have with your career and technical education programs. We have Health and Human Services, which is our FCS teacher. We have Business and Technology through our business teacher. We have Animal Science and Agronomy, which is through our ag teacher. And then we have a skilled and technical science program. So students will take at least 3 courses in one of those pathways. And we have told those students that we will guarantee you, if you go through these classes, we will guarantee you that there will be a focus on project-based learning. So there was at least one authentic project in each of those classes. And some of those classes are semester and some of those are year-long classes. And to really kick off that project-based learning to another level, our administrative team was supportive of paying our teachers in the summer to go do summer externships. So those teachers went out to job sites with those business partners that said, yes, we want to partner with you. So we took our teachers out to those job sites. I went with them, so they had the support of someone else, because all of our teachers are singleton teachers. So I went with them to kind of help develop that collaboration piece. In some cases, we had a core teacher go with us as well. So our ag teacher actually took our science teacher with her along with me. And we just learned about their business. And because as we learned about their business, then they could look at things through an educator's perspective and go, oh gosh, this is what we could be doing with the kids, and just started brainstorming right there on site. So that really helped our project-based learning, which I'll share some examples with you here shortly. But that really helped kickstart what we could potentially offer. So then again, I talked about completers. So we have that content area courses and the focus on project-based learning. Then as juniors, our students take a career readiness course. And in that career readiness course, they spend 1 quarter just learning about the career readiness standards. We actually study the book Habitudes in that class. And then 2nd quarter, they do job shadowing, and they'll go out anywhere between 4 and 8 businesses to do job shadowing. Then quarters 3 and 4, we call those practicums, and kids get hands-on learning. So they actually go out to a business in 3rd quarter, the same business for that quarter, and they'll do some type of project with that business. In some cases, it's real and it's live. In other cases, it's simulated. So for example, we have a grocery store here that we will send our business students to. Our grocery store manager knows exactly what inventory that he needs to order each and every week. He's very familiar with it. He does little to no planning because he's been in the business for so long. So one of the things he has our business students do when they're out there on their practicums is they put together what they think should be ordered. And then he'll compare that to what he actually orders and have that dialogue and that conversation with the student. So that's what I mean by sometimes it's simulated, and sometimes it's actually, working on working with a customer or a project. So they'll do 2 of those. They'll do 1 3rd quarter and then go to a different business 4th quarter. And then the final step of our Career Academy program is a capstone, and we give students some flexibility. It might be that they go out and get a certification on their own, like in the summer or during the school year. They might do some type of independent project, which a lot of times that independent project is through our CTSO organizations, or this is when they're allowed to leave school to work for up to 3 periods of the day. So here's some examples of the things that we've incorporated within our Career Academy programs or our pathways. So the first opportunity I'm going to talk about is for our business students. And we purchased in the year 2000, and I shouldn't even say purchase because I think it was given to us for, maybe $1 or less. We had a theater that used to be up and going in our community and could never really profit. So the school took it on, and we now run a 100% volunteer-based theater, and our entrepreneurship students help line up the workers and do things for our theater. So we run shows on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. It's the 1 show per weekend, and it shows at 7:30 each evening. So the kids rotate through those weekend evenings, so the whole class doesn't have to be there. It usually figures that they're down there about 4 times a semester. They have to take a turn at an evening. Then during the week, they're doing all the inventory, and they're setting up the movies. They're doing the marketing, and they're doing the bookkeeping for the theater during their class time at school. I think what's really helped this to be successful is that we have a strong board. So when you talk about a teacher taking on being a teacher as well as running a business, what he's done, or what we've done kind of collectively as a school, is we have some really strong adults in our community that serve on a board, on a theater board. And so they're really supportive of our teacher too, to kind of, I guess, carry the load of some of the work that the teacher might have and help support him. So that's an example that we have in our business area. One of the things that we do is the concession stands. We get volunteer groups, and then they are given a flat fee to do the concessions. And so if you get a movie that's not quite as popular, you'll get the same amount as if you get a movie that's really popular. And then those volunteers run the concession stand, and then they clean up at night too. So they have those 2 responsibilities, and they're given like $150 for the weekend. So it's not a lot, but it's a little bit of a token to say thank you. So we have groups like the Girl Scouts sign up, maybe it's student organizations like our junior class or a prom committee might sign up. And our students in the entrepreneurship class are responsible for lining up those groups to work the concessions. So another example that we have that came about from our teacher externships is that we have a very large feedlot in town, And we would not have known that they were working on this research project had our teachers not gone out and visited them. And so they told us about, while we were out there, a research project that they were doing with giving these cattle probiotics instead of antibiotics, where they have tagged all of the cattle and then they have tracked how often do these cattle go to the watering tank, and it will electronically track that. And then they say, okay, we're going to give these cattle that are extreme low amounts going to the watering tank or really high quantity of going to the watering tank. We're going to give them these probiotics and try to reduce our death rate. So in learning about this research project they were doing, they ended up coming into the classroom and sharing all of that research and data that they had collected with our students. And so then our students were able to do some data analysis and determine whether or not this probiotic was something that they would recommend to other cattle owners, or is this something that can only be scaled to this large feedlot. Through those conversations, we ended up being able to connect our students with their pharmaceutical rep, who is actually out of Kansas City. Kansas City is about 5 hours from here. And so because of those conversations and those connections, they were able to, for us, line up that pharmaceutical rep to actually come into the classroom and talk to students about this probiotic and be able to answer questions for them. Because the end result was the students had to determine whether or not this was a cost-effective approach for other cattle ranchers to take on. And they can't do that without actually going to the source. So they were able to do research on their own and talk to this pharmaceutical rep. We did some other things too, where the kids went out to the feedlot during the project, and they actually did an autopsy on some of the cattle to determine why are these cattle dying. And we had kids that were holding hearts in their hands and lungs in their hands of these cattle to try to figure out why did they die, and then to backtrack and say, could it have been prevented? And then look at that research of the cattle taking a drink or how often they took a drink to try to problem solve. So again, that all came about because our teachers went to the feedlot and just learned more about the feedlot. I think our business partners are really well versed in their own businesses, but they can't always see that connection to education. And that's why it was so critical. We said, we got to make it more convenient for our business partners and go to them more often to get these authentic experiences for our students. Another opportunity that's come about is our local education foundation was able to fund and build a greenhouse for our school. So our greenhouse is a little bit different than the one that Neil described. We're actually not necessarily selling anything out of it just yet. We're only in year 2 of our greenhouse, but rather the kids are doing a lot of experiments right now. So they're doing some things with hydroponics and aquaponics to determine, the health of plants when they're grown that way. Just recently, some students grew some succulents, and then they turned those succulents into corsages for our homecoming dance that was last week. So they're trying to do some different creative things just through experimentation in the greenhouse. And again, we bring in mentors for those kids to be able to ask questions, and they're throwing all kinds of just wild and crazy things out, and their teachers are saying, let's try it. So that's become what I would call more experiential learning, but definitely has transferable skills into the workplace. I've learned a lot about construction students going out and building a house in town, but because of the constraints of being a rural community and we have fiscal limitations, our construction students have focused on much smaller projects. So the picture you see here in this slide is actually our superintendent's office. They went in and redesigned and remodeled our superintendent's office. More recently, they've in our community, they've had community members that have requested to have sheds built for them, or have maybe shelves or something put up in their garages. They've built a gazebo for our assisted living facility. And this year they plan to use their computer-aided drafting software program to redesign a float for our American Legion that they use each year in our parade. So we've gotten kind of creative on our construction projects, since it's just not quite possible for us to build a house in our community. But again, we try to give those students a client or a customer as often as possible as we can in that class. Another program that we have going on is, and this was through our meetings with our employers, was that they identified that we need more welders. We desperately need more welders. And so we said, okay, we will try to offer a welding program if you will help partner with us. And so these business partners that said we need welders, they helped fund new welding stations out in our shop. And we were able to partner with a local gentleman who now comes in and offers a 0-hour class for students to work towards welding certification. We started the program where we offered it for dual credit, but we just found it was too difficult for that instructor to actually get the credentials that they needed. And we said, well, what's really more relevant to today's workforce? And it was that certification. And so through that partnership and the 0-hour, our students are now working towards just a basic level welding certification. So in this case, we really went with what industry was telling us and not that carrot of more college credit. And it seems to be really working for our students. So just here's some of the kind of challenges that we have faced and lessons that we've learned. Is the first thing, you know, as a rural community, we still struggle with matching students with what their interests are. One of the things that we did in the beginning phases, and we continue to revise and add to it, is Nebraska has a career clusters wheel or model, and we took that picture of the 6 different career clusters, and we just started to list which of our businesses in a 30-mile radius could we put into each of those career clusters. And we just started to brainstorm and take a look then and go, where are we really heavy? And we have a lot, like our ag, we have a lot of businesses there. And where are we a little bit light? And then how could we think outside the box? So like one of the areas we were really light in was in the marketing area. So we started to look at, okay, our newspaper, what do they do for marketing? Our grocery stores, what do they do? What do our banks do for marketing? So we just started to kind of think outside the box through those different career clusters. We still have to balance the needs of employers with the needs of our students. Our employers really got into this because they want workers and they want workers now. It's hard for them to find good, solid work. We continually have to communicate to our business partners to be patient. You know, I myself am an example. I didn't return to my community until 20 years after I graduated. So now I'm back home, but it took me 20 years to come back. And so we just want to create an awareness for our students about potential opportunities that they could have if they choose to come back here. I think one thing, if we had to do it differently, this process was really driven by our counselor and administrators. So in some ways that lends itself to being very fortunate. And in other ways, I really wish that our teachers would have been more involved from the very get-go in the beginning. It's really important to have your teachers, buy into this process because it is work to create project-based learning. There's a lot of contacting and communication that has to go back and forth. I'll tell you, in my position, I'm kind of that liaison for them and can help them get started. So again, at least they feel like they have support in that area. We have found ourselves where we'll offer an amazing project, and then for whatever reason, the next year, it's not sustainable. And so that's what a lot of our conversations are right now, is how do we sustain these authentic projects from year to year without exhausting our teachers. And so again, that is, that's one of my roles in the position that I have with Boone Central, is to try to support them in any way I can and help connect our business people with our teachers. So I feel like I've talked about a lot and I've talked really fast. Do you have any questions for me?
So we do have a couple questions that have come in, Sarah. Number one is your Career Academy serving just a single school district or multiple districts?
We serve just a single district. When we started, we looked at what large schools are doing, like the Lincolns and the Omahas, and even Grand Island is a large school that's beside us. And we said, how can we replicate what they are doing without building a state-of-the-art facility and integrating this into our career and technical programs that we already have in existence? So yeah, we're a single program. We don't we don't have any other schools that come join us.
Okay. Thank you. And are the programs supported by the USDA Economic Development grants? And also, what role does Extension play in your community and programs?
You know, that's one thing that I think we're really proud of, is that besides our greenhouse, we have not utilized any extra funding to do any of this. The building of our greenhouse has been the only thing. The extension program, we have not utilized as much as maybe we probably should through our career academies. We've done some work with after school programs, like our after school program now utilizes our greenhouse and some of our other things that we've created. In our after school program for elementary students uses our extension office a lot. They have partnerships and programs through there, but at the secondary level at the high school, we just probably haven't tapped into that resource as much as we could. So that's a really good suggestion.
All right, and for the career readiness class, are all students required to take this course? And how many placements do you have for students to do the on-site work experience?
So that's an idea that we have really toyed with, is should we require this of all of our students or leave it optional? And at this point in time, we have left it optional. So all of our students do not go through the Career Academy, which does offer a challenge. So you might be having an advanced plant science class with Career Academy students and non-Career Academy students. And so we're always talking about what challenges there are there. But we typically have about 25 kids in our career readiness course. And so we know which employers want one student and which employers are willing to take 2 or 3 students. So we're able to find, kind of the way it works is the very first placement, the kids will give suggestions and ideas of where they want to go. The instructor helps place them for the first time. And then after that, it's up to the kids to find their second placement, because we say there's a lot of skills there that are involved in order to contact the business, in order to line it up, in order to follow up with the business. So the first one the teacher does, and then after that, the kids are responsible for finding their locations. But we really haven't had a problem. You know, our biggest class size has been 30. We haven't had a problem, you know, finding placements for all those kids. But we've definitely thought outside the box. And we might have a situation too where our hospital has been one of our best partners. They have all of the kids go through HIPAA training. And so they have, you know, say 5 or 6 departments at our hospital. So they'll take 5 or 6 kids and just run them through those different departments while they're out there.
Thank you for that. We might have time for a couple more quick questions. I know we're at time, but one question is, do you have any advice on incorporating WBL for students with disabilities?
Yeah, we work closely with our special education department, and if needed, we'll send a job coach out with our kids, so they'll stay on site with the student. A lot of times our students with disabilities are the ones that can't drive, so we have paraprofessionals lined up that will help drive those students to the workplaces. So we have tried to set up a program that is both for those kids who want to be doctors and those kids who, you know, might be a convenience clerk for the rest of their lives. We've tried to set up a program that is for all levels of learning and will serve all kids, you know, no matter the disability that they may have.
Excellent. Last question. This might be a quick one. Who maintains the database of employers and opportunities? Is that you?
It is a combination of myself and then our teacher who teaches the career readiness course. It's kind of a combination between the two of us. And part of that database too is we've developed a lot of documents to help educate our employers on like what is a good job shadowing experience look like. If a kid comes out 10 times, we have a tip sheet that we give our employers to say, this is what you could show them on visit 1 and the discussion points you could have. Here's what you could show them on visit 2 and the discussion points. So I've helped create those along with our career readiness, you know, teacher. And I really think because in a small school, because you're a singleton, if you can provide that support for the teachers, just if they have somebody to, you know, brainstorm ideas with, I think that's really critical to getting things moving and off the ground.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. And with that, I think we'll wrap up. A huge thanks to the presenters and the attendees who have stuck through. And this was an hour and 20 minutes long, and I think it went really quickly, and that's a reflection of how engaged the attendees were and how important the material was. And this material, as I mentioned earlier, it will be made available to you. It'll be emailed out once it's approved and finalized. You'll also receive a very brief survey, just a handful of questions. So if you want to take that, we always appreciate getting feedback. We have our references here. I'll just kind of scan through these really quick. Again, this will be made available in the materials. And that's it. So again, big thanks, and I hope everyone has a great day. Take care.